right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined from what Americans like to say is across the pond in the UK, up near Sheffield, lovely part of the world, by Steve Radford. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm good, thank you, John. How are you?
Good. And Steve is a seasoned sales expert, over 25 years experience empowering frontline salespeople to excel in customer-focused selling. As a leader in sales learning, you've founded award-winning businesses, scaled sales teams from small groups to hundreds, and enhanced sales capabilities for global brands. And you're the co-creator of one of the UK's first university-accredited sales programs. Wow, that's excellent. And and you are also the author's practical guides, and the writer of How to Sell Everything You Need to Think and Know and Do. Let's see, How to Sell Everything You Need to Think, Know and Do, and Have Greater Sales Conversations. There you go. The book's
There we
behind
go.
you. Perfect.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Easy for me to say. There you go. All right. So tell me, based on all your experience, like one of the hardest things is one of the things that they tend to do, like even here in America, like company gets a load of investment capital, right? You know, they go to a VC. First thing most of them do is they go out and hire a bunch of salespeople,
Yes.
right? And then uh, and then of those, maybe they go out and hire 20 salespeople. Of them, you may be lucky if 18 ever, or if 2 out of the 18 ever, or 20 ever make it, right? And the other 18. Why is recruiting and onboarding, especially onboarding and getting salespeople productive, so difficult?
I think I work with a lot of frontline teams who, like you say, they'll grow in large numbers.
Mhm.
They'll put a new team together. The first thing is recruitment itself is difficult. And
Yeah.
I think largely because a lot of organizations focus on the wrong area. They focus on knowledge, skills, and experience. But what they fail to focus on as well is the traits that make successful salespeople within their organization, within their customer base. So, what motivates that person? What are their values? What's their personality like? Do they fit within our organization? Do they fit with our team? Do they fit well with our customers? And that's the one of the things I think people get wrong. The other thing is they don't support salespeople enough, I think, in that
Yep.
critical early phase. Early career salespeople, they need a lot of support, especially if you're dealing with field salespeople or, hybrid working. You know, it's not, you don't just set people off running and then just keep the ones that swim, right? It's
Mhm.
got to support them. And so I think there's that's one of the reasons you see really high attrition in a lot of those large ramp ups.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, you're right about the recruitment part, because I feel that recruitment is often rushed. It's done, and there's not a lot of thought put into it, because recruitment's difficult and it's hard, and most people don't enjoy doing it in the first place. And even if you have a great like HR department or whatever, there's still quite a burden on the organization. And I think people kind of avoid that, and they kind of they default to that sink or swim, or as I said, they're lazy in their recruitment. They just grab whatever job description for that role there was last time, or they grab it off the internet and they hope for the best.
Yeah, and it's difficult. I mean,
Mm.
you can assess knowledge and skills and experience to a degree through the resumes that people send in. Those
Mhm.
deeper values and things are, you can't really do that until you get a person in front of you. And obviously that is, expensive exercise.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the problem, particularly in, ramp ups. They focus
Yeah.
on the bits that are easy, the bits they can potentially throw through AI to do a bit of sifting nowadays.
Mhm.
And as a result, they probably get rid of people who would be extremely successful in that organization as long as they get the right development and support during that, critical early 90-day period. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the 90 days. So how do you set yourself up for a productive and effective 90-day onboarding period? Because otherwise, most companies, it's probably 6 months, and then they realize who's working and who's not.
Yes. I think if you get the recruitment piece right,
Mhm.
um, you've then got to recognize that what organizations want and what new hires want are slightly different things. So organizations want people to come in, they want to integrate, they
Yeah.
want to engage, start to contribute. you're not going to get to ROI performance within 90 days, but they need to be on the path to get there. New hires want the same thing, but early career people, specifically now, are looking for, they want that done at speed.
Hmm.
Um, they want the process to feel personalized. They want some agency in that process. They want to be involved in that too. And they want to feel that they've got the right level of support. I think all of those things are different now to probably 10, 15 years ago, much more important. So you need a process that does a bit of that.
Yeah, I would agree just on the idea of support because I do think we often have in the past failed to support salespeople. We've often thought, well, they're salespeople, they're resourceful, they just go out and they just do what they do. Meanwhile, you're sending off other people in the organization. You're sending them off on training. You're paying for certifications, and you're just leaving the salespeople. So, what would you say in the first 30 days? What would you be looking for? Like, what are the skills that you think they need, and what you would be looking for to say, yeah, we're on track?
Okay, so it can be different with different organizations, different teams, but you need to have that understanding of, well, what are the knowledge and skills that drive people to be successful in this organization, in this role?
Hmm.
um, Not just the KPIs and the targets that they lead to, but the knowledge and skills that drive the behaviors that deliver those KPIs and targets. So obviously there is you mentioned earlier, I've got a book out, and in there's 5 key knowledge areas and 7 key skills that I think all salespeople need to have, but those will be represented slightly differently in different organizations. So I think the first thing you need to do, particularly if you are onboarding a number of salespeople or doing it regularly, take a good look at what they look like within your organization.
Mm.
Um, because that then allows, through the hire process, but also in more detail afterwards, you can then start to, gap scan people against those, because people are going to have different strengths and weaknesses
Yeah.
against that profile. And that's the start of that personalization piece I talked about a moment ago. It's also key because if you get the new hire involved in that, what you're doing is you're setting expectations.
Hmm.
Yes, they'll know what their targets and KPIs are. I'm pretty sure they'll be drilled into them early on. But what you're doing is setting the expectation of, in order to reach there, these are the areas of knowledge you need to develop. This are the skills that we need to see. And then these have to come collectively together to drive your behaviors. So people become a lot more engaged in the process.
And then, so there's a balance then, obviously, between you want them to have like knowledge of the product, service, whatever they're selling, but sometimes that's where all the focus is put,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I
And
would agree with that.
tell me, that can be an issue too.
Oh, hugely. Yeah. It's where most, organizations start. You'll have a day of product training. Sometimes that'll be delivered by the marketing department, or,
Mhm.
if you're lucky, you've got a sales enablement team who kind of then
Right.
translate that language into what salespeople need. But there's certain things that don't get enough attention. So, for example, what does the entire sales pipeline look like for this organization? What's your role within it? If you're just responsible for part of it, how do those leads come to you? Where do those prospects go after?
Mhm.
How does that integration work? All absolutely critical to the success of that individual long term, and their integration early on. Things like that are areas of knowledge that typically don't get enough
Yeah.
focus in those early days. Yeah, but product training it's important, but it's one part.
And there's another part too, isn't it? Right. So your product training skills, but it's also you've got great institutional knowledge in the organization. You maybe have like very successful people. Say, tell me about the role of mentorship, because I feel like that is something that's overlooked. You know, the idea of like mentoring, it's overlooked in a lot, and it's such an easy thing because you have you have the ideal people, a lot of them to be mentors. You have the people who need mentorship. You just need to put them together.
Yes, and you get labels, everything's coaching, nowadays. Whereas I see the a training spectrum for me has 4 key elements to it, and you choose which one you use depending on the individual. So it runs from instruction, teaching, mentoring, and coaching. So when you've got a new starter or someone that's learning something that's new, no experience in an area, so that's the instruction end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's also where you're more tell focused in terms of the knowledge transfer, and more nurture focused in terms of the encouragement spectrum. But the goal is you move them along. Teaching is then when, okay, we're still on the tell side of the equation, but
Yeah.
we're now getting them actively involved. Yeah. And we're starting to bring in a level of challenge. We need you to be doing something with this.
Mhm.
Mentoring is then when you cross that midway boundary. So this is where you're probably more asking than telling, but the
Right.
mentor should be an expert in that
Mm.
area who can step in and fill the gaps. And then
Yeah.
coaching is the far end of the spectrum. But to come to your mentoring question, because you want an expert guide, but you're dealing with people who are already recognized to have some knowledge and skill, this is where it's really useful to have a mentor that's not in their line management chain, because
Mhm.
people are more comfortable to open up about, I know I probably should know this, but it's actually an area I want to focus on. And a
Right.
mentor from outside of your line management chain is much more, yeah, you get it's an easier conversation for these people to have. And it's typically the area that gets in that chain least attention. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I think it's also good that you differentiate. You know, and you say mentoring is one thing, coaching is another thing. Coaching, I'll be honest with you, Steve. Coaching is something that most people have no clue how to do. It's not a natural talent. It doesn't come inherent. Most people, you know, relate coaching back to, you know, their high school coach. You know, whether you're on the football team or whatever,
Yeah.
just shouting at you and telling you what to do, and you just execute, and that's not coaching in the real world, in professional
No.
sense. So I like the fact, you know, that you differentiated, because coaching is a real skill. How do you, within organizations, this skill often is very lacking. So I mean, how do you help people, you know, as part of the onboarding, actually help the organizations learn how to coach properly?
So the first thing I do is you show the individual you're hoping to develop that pathway. I've got a
Hmm.
graphical way of running it out
Yeah.
and explain to them, look, this is the pathway we want to take you on. I will note, I'll kind of call out when we're perhaps moving if I'm, doing all of that development program with you. But as an individual, they know a little bit about what to expect. They understand that level of challenge he's going to build. I also think it helps that person that's running the development to kind of think carefully about their approach. I am not a natural coach. I have to
Mm.
work hard. I am more natural in the teaching and mentoring
Right.
space. And one of the things when you're developing salespeople further on, you have to sit on your hands a bit, right? You have to
Mhm.
like the wrong thing to do is to step in and provide the answer. That's not where their learning works. So part of helping people to develop their coaching is those basic principles. And then I'm a great fan of keeping it simple. I mean, there's
Yeah.
the grow model I really love, which is essentially it's a coaching conversation is one where what's the goal? What's the reality? What are our options? And what's the way forward? And it's a
Mhm.
collaborative conversation. So for me, I keep it to those principles and quite a simple coaching process. One that it's easy for both the person that's being developed and the manager or whoever's running the development to kind of follow.
Yeah. Yeah. And what kind of metrics should you be tracking during this period? I mean, I know they'll be different for different organizations, but maybe some common ones that you would recommend.
A key metric, I try and stay away from the softer metrics.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's nice to have people tell you against the knowledge and skills that you want, where they feel they are and where you
Mhm.
feel they are. And that's great. That's useful. But what you want to start measuring is KPIs that are related to pipeline.
Right.
Most organizations don't have enough of these. They'll focus on when they talk about KPIs, what they really often mean is targets.
Mhm.
But what we do is get people to look at, okay, what are all the stages that customers move through in their pipeline, the customer's journey? Let's measure that. How many customers have you got at each stage? How's that changing? What's the velocity like? How long are they sticking at certain stages? And let's focus on those smaller metrics. So those are the things that I like to focus on. They're the
Yeah.
outcomes of the training rather than the did we deliver the training. For me, that's nice to know, but we're here
Yeah.
to drive outputs. Yeah.
Well, plus the metrics you're talking about there, those are ones that you actually can impact, right? I mean, the thing is, if you just look at targets, you know, it's backward looking, because you either make the target or you don't. There's nothing you can do about it once you realize that you haven't made the target. It's all in the past. But
Yeah.
what you're talking about there is, if you have KPIs and very tightly aligned to the process, you can see, you know, say velocity, you can see immediately, oh, these are going above the recommended, you know, length of time.
Yep.
I Somewhere to act immediately. That's something I can impact, right?
Yeah.
Rather than
Totally.
looking back later and going, oh yeah, well, the reason that didn't close was, well, look at it, got stuck.
Yeah. And there's other things that get ignored that can
Mhm.
be really useful. What percentage of your conversations are you actually speaking to a decision maker? Well,
Absolutely.
again, let's not look at conversational volume. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not speaking to the right person. So again, it starts people thinking about, okay, what are the things I can do to nudge that probability of speaking to a decision maker up? They start to focus on the things that are going to make a difference, those kind of marginal gains throughout the entire pipeline. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's where I kind of focus my metrics on.
Yeah, and your book, in your book, like How to Sell, great conversations, right? The principles of great conversations. Like, how do you instill those into salespeople? Like really understanding that.
So the book's in three parts. I start with mindsets before
Mhm.
we get to knowledge and skills.
Yeah.
Mindsets are the things that underpin behaviors fundamentally above the traits we kind of spoke about earlier. So we look at things like the win-win mindset, the ROI mindset, the growth mindset. So we start there. Um, those are the things that underpin conversations, especially when those conversations become either very relaxed or very stressed. People
Right.
start to forget the things they've recently learned. But if you focus on those underlying principles, they tend to drive in the right way. Then when you get through to we've talked a bit about knowledge, but when you get through to the skills, I've got a 7-step model for conversations, which is based on how customers like to buy rather than how salespeople like to sell. So we kind of focus on those steps as well.
How has it changed, and how have you had to adapt to, now that there's so much more remote work and hybrid? You may not even have those salespeople ever come together,
Yep.
physically and stuff. So has that? Have you had to adapt to that, or how has that changed? Is there anything you do differently now when you work with like distributed sales forces?
Oh, completely. So I've always worked with a lot of field sales teams, for
Hmm.
example. So
Yeah.
I've always had a similar kind of
Mhm.
challenge. And so delivering things remotely has always been part of my repertoire. What I'm doing much more of now is overlaying what I do with teams on a longer term basis. So in addition to the kind of the accelerator stuff that we do, so for example, new supporting a client who's onboarding a new team, we do a day as part of week 1 and we do a 2-day program in about week 5. But what we also then do is we every week we do a drop-in session
Mm.
that for their team, where actually what we look at is we look at their live deals and we use one of those live deals as almost like a group mentoring
Oh,
program.
right. Yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah. So, and that's to overlay what's happening with the managers. So managers will often attend those and things too, but the way technology has gone, it's a lot easier to do that now. We have
Yeah.
teams where, I'll have 8 people on one of those calls. Some people will be joined from their car. They'll all be on video. Some people will be at a desk. It's a lot easier to do those things now through technology.
Yeah, it's just the person driving in the car, you gotta remind them not to look at the video.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Most
yeah,
on mobile off, right?
yeah, no, no,
Um, yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, I love that because I used to do that with one organization, with the sales team. It's like bring clusters together and have them, one person present, the opportunity they were working on, and other people feed into. It's so great. I don't understand why a lot of organizations don't do that, because it's that peer stuff is so good.
and you get when you can see when the team are getting there because
Yeah,
other people jump in with
yeah,
suggestions and answers before I will. And
yeah.
that's when yeah, okay, we're getting here as a team. They're starting to support each other as well as me supporting them and the manager supporting them.
How are you approaching the whole AI area? Because right now, obviously, there's tons of tools. Like we're building a lot of AI and native AI into pipeline or CRM. We use a lot of AI ourselves, but our attitude is you should be, it's particularly in sales, you should be using AI to elevate yourself, right? To make, to be able to focus on the things where you can bring real value and you can actually stand out. I fear that some people are just using shortcuts and stuff instead of going, this is going to make me better. Oh, this just to make life easy. How are you approaching that whole conundrum?
So AI is increasingly baked into everything that we do. So
Hmm.
one of the things that we've developed, it's in beta at the moment, is an AI thinking partner. It's voice first. You can chat to it. It
Nice.
understands all the methodologies I train. But the idea is you can go as far as role play with it should you want to. But the idea is that it's always on, it's always available. You can chat to it between calls. AI is really interesting in that I find most sales teams either overuse it or underuse it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
There are sales teams who are over relying on it, and it's doing their thinking for them in a lot of cases. And there are other salespeople who are not leveraging it enough.
Yeah.
And the point there is that if they're going to conversations and they're doing things that AI can do, then they shouldn't be there. But if they're going to conversations and they're not using AI to help them prepare,
Yeah.
then they're going to be replaced by a salesperson that does, or by a competitor that does.
Yeah.
Salesperson
Absolutely.
is, salespeople need to have AI as an integral part of their toolkit now. Um,
Yeah.
Pre-conversation, post-conversation. With the sales teams I work with, I like to keep it out of live conversations. That,
Yeah.
for me, that's the point where your human to human interaction should take the fore.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely integral to sales teams now.
Yeah, no, no, I would agree. I think the conversation, the relationship building, all of that, that's where you should be focused. And AI should make that, should make it so that you're better prepared for those, and it's a wonderful tool. So what's your last piece of advice? Sorry, I didn't know that was on. My apologies, everyone. What's your last piece of advice that you would give to maybe people who are struggling with their sales teams right now?
I think you've got to see your team primarily as people and understand there is no one side, one solution that's just going to work.
Mhm.
Um, you need your development program needs to do two things. It needs to be able to personalize around the people that you've got in your team,
Yeah.
because different people will need different levels of support, kind of like that instruct, teach, mentor, coach pathway I spoke about a moment ago. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is you've got to continually reinforce stuff. So personalization and reinforcement. People don't learn anything by doing it once.
Yeah.
So you need a development pathway that has lots of touch points over long periods of time, not pulling people off the road for 2 days of training.
Yeah, and I would endorse that. Having, like I said earlier, I ran Huthwaite, and spin selling, and we did big implementation, big huge companies across the globe. Biggest challenge was always making it stick afterwards. Yeah, and
Yeah.
having that reinforcement and having sales managers and stuff like that. Because if it's not embedded into your workflow in some way, it's going to atrophy very, very quickly.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And that's true of anything that we learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, thanks so much, Steve. All of Steve's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do tell people a little bit, remind people about what you do.
So I help leaders of B2B frontline salespeople to accelerate their team's performance. Working increasingly remotely to support what they do in house.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks again, Steve. Thank you for watching and listening. And I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.